Welcome to the Practical Esoteric video podcast. This is your host, VerDarLuz, also from Divine Timing Coaching, and we are exploring Saturn and Pisces through all 12 signs. And this is going to be a deeper dive into another video that we have all about Saturn's movement through Pisces from 2023 to 2026. So definitely check that video out. And very excited to share with you about how each sign of the zodiac is going to be affected by this transit and how you can harmonize and navigate this with grace and with ease and with abundance in your life. It's a special kind of abundance with Saturn moving into Pisces. It's spiritual abundance that we're looking for. As you can see here, you have this image of a kind of ascension process going on. And there can be during this cycle a real sense of a cultivation and a discipline that we all must start to have, a kind of responsibility towards our spiritual development or our artistic path. It can be bringing structures into our creativity and our imagination, and a sense of really being accountable, using time to build into a relationship with our spiritual selves. So that could be through greater meditation, greater amounts of yoga, reading spiritual texts. We have to watch with being depressed or having unhealthy boundary dissolution. Pisces is a sign that, it lives in the dream world. It lives in the spirit world. It's mystical and magical and mythical. And so grounding that can be a difficult task as Saturn starts to move into Pisces. And we'll see that whatever Pisces house you have in your chart, it's an area that's going to require a lot of discipline and hard work from Saturn. But it's also that area of your life where you do have that mystic bent, where you are more spiritually inclined, and there can be some kind of magic that works in that house for you. And so you are easily boundary dissolving in that house. And so today, as we explore, let's consider how Saturn is bringing a sense of, righteous effort into that place of your life. And we'll also talk about, if you have planets in those signs, they're going to get this initiation from Saturn. And the Saturn initiation is, like the Zen master cracking the back with the stick and it hurts, right? Sit up straight, right? Meditate deeper, meditate longer. Focus, right? Focus the mind, crystallize. The crystallization process is a very Saturnian process. And it's about cementing, bringing into form. And also there may be a question in this time of really what's real. We're going to ask that question about reality as Saturn moves into that house that is our Pisces house. I like this image here of Saturn over the ocean of Costa Rica here, the coastline. And it looks so real, right? Like so many of the arts that's been created with Midjourney and other technology right now. And as we talked about in this other video, the AI that's emerging and the augmented and virtual realities, there's something about that question of reality and how to really ground ourselves and discipline ourselves with Saturn is going into our charts in this next couple of years. So let's just get focused on what Saturn means before we dive into the specific areas of life in your own chart. Saturn is structure, looks beautiful, right? We love the Saturnian rings. And there is a sense of weightedness. There's an image of Atlas here. This is a planetary portrait I'm showing on the video. And I created these to help you initiate yourselves through the planets and integrate their meanings. You see the clock here, right? And Saturn is also known as Kronos, the Lord of Time. And so we must discipline ourselves over time. Saturn is the taskmaster. And it's our ability to respond to life's challenges and obstacles. Saturn will reward us, but it requires hard work through a lot of effort. It's not like Jupiter, right? Jupiter can kind of bestow a blessing or a gift of abundance on you, and it could seem to come out of nowhere, really. But Saturn is always going to only come through the kind of effort that you put in. And so here's some of the keywords for Saturn, right? Discipline, responsibility, misfortune. There can be struggle with Saturn, especially as he moves into a new area of your life, a new house. There can be something really, really challenging or overwhelming right away in that house. So we want to expect that. And then that's going to be the obvious test for us. And testing is a very Saturnian word. In fact, if you think of all the ST words, like stop, right? Saturn does bring a pause. He makes us focus wherever he's going through our chart. Stern. Saturn is a stern, stern lord of, you must do this, and must, right? The kind of commandment or demand of the word must is also Saturnian. It's that combination of S and T that comes together. And that's something very interesting with the lore of Saturn. So there can also be a feeling of separation, of loss, or of indebtedness. We're going to be indebted to the area where Saturn is in our chart. There's certain kinds of feelings of impoverishment there. As we said, of course, challenge. Now, we benefit if we get into a routine wherever Saturn is going into that area of our life, right? Daily practice there, right? If you think of Saturn, also think of karma yoga. And this is talked about in the Bhagavad Gita quite a bit, right? Where we get that sense of offering everything we do up to, in the Gita's case, Krishna, but it can be to any deity or divine force within us. And that's really important over this next few years, that we really have an active relationship with some spiritual energy or entity or guide beyond ourselves, and offer our daily practices, our work, our karma, our action, which is what the word karma means, to that force inside of us, that deity force or that higher force. And so getting into routine with our actions can be very helpful. And creating boundaries around those routines can also be helpful. Boundaries is a very Saturnian word. Limitation, constriction. There can be some initial sorrows. The failures that Saturn, quote unquote failures that Saturn can bring into our lives, it tests our resilience, right? And it shows us where we need to work harder, and we need to maybe get some training, right? Some education, learn some step-by-step process, take the steady approach to building our success. And Saturn, also rules ambition and achievement, realistic pragmatism, what can actually be accomplished, productivity, and also the father figure and the paternal. So you always kind of have that father figure watching over that area where Saturn is going through your chart. And so these are some of the, the keywords for Saturn. And this is going to be really important to develop these qualities with Saturn's house position. And so I'm going to take you now into Saturn moving through the 12 houses, the 12 signs, and how these will affect you in the coming years. Remember, Saturn is moving through Pisces between February 2023 and March of 2026. So if you are a Pisces rising, this means that Saturn is moving into your first house and crossing your ascendant right away, right? all through March is going to be the peak moment. And when Saturn crosses the first house, you are literally starting to wear the mask of Saturn. It's like you put on the Saturn costume. You're going to feel a certain weightiness to that. Literally in your physical body, you will feel some of that weightiness. And there can be a sense of, how am I appearing to the world? I can become very present or conscious of my age. And I may want to appear older. I may just appear older when I look in the mirror. So we get very concerned with our personal identity. And that means that we want to have a lot of integrity, and we need to. In fact, Saturn will demand that our character be developed a lot during this next few years. One of the challenges as a Pisces rising or Pisces suns is that we don't have a set defined, version of ourselves. Pisces is very diffuse, right? Its identity is very often dependent on its environment. So, you Pisces types have this kind of challenge from Saturn to crystallize, I think, your ability to channel spirit through the arts or through your spiritual practices. But it can be a sense of a little bit challenging to be so defined, right? Now, one of the things you can do is get into a healthy, regular regime every day, a regular routine, which again is not the nature necessarily of Pisces, but be sensitive, become very sensitive to how you are so empathic to your environment, like as a sponge often, right, with Pisces. And you may become very aware that you're more critical of yourself than normal. And that's partially the quality of Saturn, it is to bring a certain critical eye to what we're doing. This may make us more serious. Typically, we might not see a Pisces rising or a Pisces sun be necessarily so serious, but we can feel that sobering tone. And this actually might be a time when Pisces, a very, ecstatic sign who typically loves to drink and party and take drugs or alcohol or medicines of any kind and every kind, it might be a time where you sober up. So there's a sense of wanting to kind of control our lives a bit more with Saturn in the first house. And this can also be a great time to work on your diet. And again, eating the same kinds of foods, maybe a little bit more minimal every day for long periods of time while Saturn is in this first house. We might even have a more pessimistic outlook at times, but it's really trying to be more pragmatic or realistic. Again, not necessarily those Pisces qualities. So you are learning how to mature your work as a spiritual or artistic channel in the world. And also, Saturn here can kind of, we could say, rip away the superficial or, the illusory. And so, if we've had any kind of misconceptions about how we've been identifying, or if we've been projected on a lot, a very common theme with Pisces, you want to look at really looking in the mirror in this way that feels like I'm getting clear on who I am and what I want to represent myself as. And if things take longer to build and grow and achieve, that's very normal for Saturn through the first house. As it takes time, it will grow into success and it will start to sculpt itself. And in a way, you can even use the metaphor of sculpture and think of, like, at this time, Michelangelo is sculpting your physical body, your outer identity, your perspective on life, and bringing you into a realism about your image, your health, your self-confidence. And you will build these out over the coming years. But initially, you might feel a little discouraged or like weighted down by some of the different responsibilities you have, or maybe the way you've been showing up. And so really committing to yourself, and maybe a lot of self-love, which might just take more time. Pisces is a very empathic sign and gives itself away a lot of the time. This might be just a cycle where you really need to focus on yourself more. And maybe it is those spiritual retreats that you can do a lot of self-development and self-work. Maybe you are actually facilitating them, and that becomes part of your work. That's a great combination of Saturn and Pisces. I think it's a time where a lot of us might want to be doing more intentional retreat, and you may become a leader with that, Pisces. So if we move forward and we can see that Aries rising, and Aries sun signs, we're going to look at the sun. We're going to look at Saturn being in the 12th house. And this is going to invite us over the next few years to really look at it, at ourselves in a deep way. You know, the 12th house is known as a very mystical domain. It's actually connected with the sign of Pisces by affiliation. And so for you, Aries risings, Aries types, you know, you're often quite busy and adventurous and impulsive. And this could be a time in your life where you actually slow down quite a bit and you really do a lot of inner contemplation. We typically talk about the 12th house as a realm where we're cleaning out our psyches, you know, the skeletons in the closet. And it can be a great time to do a lot of esoteric study and work on the archetypal realm, dream work, mythology, taking a lot more downtime, in time, we could say. We might face some demons as well. I mean, the 12th house can have some resonance with things like mental health. So it could be that you're really called to work with a therapist, right? Or work with a coach, and you're sussing out what has been in your unconscious. Doing past life regression work can be one of the great pathways for you during the next couple of years. Maybe you want to do a training in that. Maybe you get really into breath work and looking into a path like rebirthing. In the ancient world, the 12th house was associated with the womb because it's the house that is actually, you know, rising before the rising. And so we want to kind of access those places that we don't typically on a daily basis. Now, there's something else where the ego is very dissolved in this house. So you might actually get called to doing some service work or working in some kinds of institutions. For instance, you may be called to spend some time at an ashram or abroad. Maybe you want to live abroad. Maybe you want to live in a yoga community for a while, right? Or do some detox and, you know, work in a retreat environment. And you may be of greater service. Sometimes people might be called to working in prisons or hospitals or hospice during this cycle. And your own health may be a little bit compromised. This is the house that is not in a good configuration, healthy configuration to the first house, the house of the body. So sometimes we may, again, need to slow down and, again, take care of ourselves on a daily basis. But it's usually a little bit more of the mental health that we're working on. And so studying psychoanalysis, psychology, obviously astrology can be a part of this, mythology. This can be really, really beneficial during this time. And it can be a great time to be studying spiritual texts, to increasing our meditation and developing a quality where we can kind of free ourselves from a lot of ego attachments. And so, yeah, for the Aries, which can be very self-focused, this can be a challenging time, but a really rewarding time of discovering the vastness of consciousness and letting yourself just drop into a really much deeper space of consciousness. And so when we look at Taurus, for you Taurus risings and Taurus suns, you could see that Saturn is in your 11th house now. And over the next few years, there is going to be a journey where you're going to have to really cultivate a community. And cultivation, it's interesting if you think of cultivation, like when we do that with plants, we actually have to cut away some things, right? We have to, like horticulture is, you have to get rid of some of the detritus, what doesn't look so good or doesn't help the plant to grow. And there may be some friends in your life or some community members, or even communities that you're a part of that really aren't serving you. This is an important point because when Saturn moves into a new area of our lives, there's often a chiseling away, a severing of some kind that takes place. And it's usually just harder overall in that area. So maybe there's a sudden break with a community or a group of friends, or you're just like, these are not my people anymore, And so why aren't they your people? Maybe because you have different goals now, right? And that's arrived because you've just been through Saturn in your 10th house, and you've had all this professional development, and now you know who your people are, what your visions are, your ideals. And so maybe these aren't the same kinds of communities anymore, right? They don't have the same causes as you. So this questions our affiliations this cycle and how we fit in with others and groups. And, we may become also someone who has more responsibility in those groups. We may become an authority figure, especially by the end of this transit, within a circle of friends or a community. But initially we can feel more alienated. And this could require that we really look at, are these relationships or friendships like too casual? I don't really know where they're going, right? This is a very Saturnian thing that we want to feel like we are building towards some goal together. And if we're not building the same pyramid together, then we need to work on different projects, and you need to go your way and I need to go mine. We could also develop some very serious friendships in a very positive way that could be very enduring or really help us to achieve our long-term visions and goals. So where we are committed in our life in terms of things like career, or maybe a religious or spiritual path, or even, these friendships, that we want to really sense that there's something that's going to have resilience and endurance, persistence to it. And really that the energy that we're applying is going to develop through time. So Taurus types also are going to receive a really nice sextile from Saturn and Pisces, which can be bringing you some really creative energy. It can help bring some of, Taurus, maybe some projects you're working on, could be something to do with a home, could be something creative, that Saturn can help bring the discipline into your life, maybe a different kind of structure for you that maybe hasn't been there in a while, and that can help you grow over time with, this project. And that's going to be very, very much an assistance for you. And that's the beauty of the sextile aspect of it. It brings some support into your life. So when you're looking at Gemini risings and Gemini suns, now this is the sign that is going to be squared by Saturn and Pisces, and it's a very strong square. This is the superior square from Saturn. Superior meaning it's actually in the 10th house, and it's like above, the Gemini sign here. And this is one of the strongest aspects that we can have from Saturn. And so, Saturn is in the area of career for the next couple of years. And when this cycle starts, there can feel like a deep overwhelm with all the professional responsibilities that we have. we have to ask ourselves, are we satisfied with our career path? And right away, we can feel that there's new responsibilities and pressures, this kind of weight of the world. Whoa, okay, I have a lot here, and I feel kind of like I'm limited in what I can achieve. So it becomes really important to get into this structuring of our goals around our career. And this is the best time to redo a business model, or if you don't have one, to do one for the first time and really build out the structure of that. Like, what is my long-term success really going to look like? This is no longer a time where I can kind of just get by or, scrape the surface. We're going to be held very responsible when Saturn is in this 10th house. And that means that, authority figures, we may have some issues with them. We may have some confrontation with them. We may be challenged by them. So if you do work, in a situation where there is a kind of hierarchy, you need to be very sensitive to your relationship to a boss or to any authority figures, because there tends to be some stress involved with them. We will be in the spotlight in some way, and our integrity will be questioned. A lot of times just because we have more responsibilities, and the repercussions of fulfilling on them or not become a lot more powerful, and the consequences more powerful. Now, you could also think back, Gemini types, to about 7 years before, and also 14 years before. 14 years before, there was, all this energy around our home where Saturn was, and there may even have been some connection with our career at that point that is coming up for some examination. This is true always for Saturn. Every 7 years, Saturn is making this square opposition to where it was before. And so for everyone, this is an important reflective process, is to look at where the planet was 7 years before and see what was going on at that time. So as Saturn is changing sign now, think about 7 years before and where it was. And there will be some resonance, some themes, maybe even some people in your life that come back in to bring these energies up for re-examination. And this is a very serious, like, magnifying glass, microscope type of examination with Saturn. Especially in the 10th house, we need to look at what we really want to accomplish in our lives and get really practical with what it takes to steadily build our success. Maybe we need to hire a team, and we've never done that before. So we've been a solopreneur. Now we want to, we want to grow. And the fact is, I have to actually have team members to grow or to scale my business. Well, that means I have to, take care of people in a way. I have to learn how to do that. I have to learn how to manage people. Right? And maybe this wasn't there before. So we also kind of take a stand for something when Saturn is in this area of our life, the 10th house. Saturn we think of as someone quite rigid archetype, right? And so, with Pisces ruling our area of career, Gemini types, we're not very rigid about anything. But at this time, we may need to really stand for something. And it may just be that we come out with a message or something around our career that makes it more solid in the public sphere, makes it more like, branding, for instance. When we brand ourselves, we have to really be more solid, with kind of portray a more stable sense of who we are. And, with Gemini, we're very mutable, right? We're very changeable. We're shapeshifters. So that can be the big challenge during Saturn's move into the 10th house. But the reward will come as we put in the hard work and as we crystallize our role in the world. And we can't be afraid of that here. In fact, we will be able to offer more perspectives and new ways of people perceiving what we're doing. If we actually do take a stand for something, then we can start to open that up to being many things again. But for this cycle for Gemini, you need to be maybe chiseling away some of those things you've been doing so that other areas can grow and mature. And you have to appear more mature. And Gemini is the most youthful looking sign and often acting sign. So this is a time where that could get in your way if you're not careful. So be aware of like how to grow up. And I would recommend the work of James Hillman, and specifically the Puer Senex, the Puer being the eternal youth. And you want to question the eternal youth quality within yourself, that there's always something new to experience, and there's always some new information to learn and to share. And not that that's not valuable, but this is a time where you have to really take what you have learned and stand for it and get it out into the world, right? And be that messenger, really stand up and proclaim what you've learned and structure how you're going to share that with the entire planet. And so if we go forward and we look at you Cancer risings, right? Now we have Saturn in your 9th house and Cancer moons as well. And one of the things that we know about the 9th house is that this has always been an area where our souls are seeking to grow. And they grow often through learning. This is a kind of academic learning or a more spiritual learning. It's really the hero's quest, the 9th house. And so we've been on a journey with the 8th house where we've delved deep into our psychology, and now we find meaning. And so when Saturn moves into the 9th house, we start to question actually what we believe in. And we have to look at our worldview, our cosmology. Like, why do we believe what we believe in? Do we believe in anything? It's really a time where we must improve ourselves. And one of the ways we do that is by questioning our sense of faith and what really motivates our soul to grow. If we've been studying, what are we moving towards? What is that going to mean in our lives? What is my spiritual pathway? Did I grow up in a religious context, and am I questioning that now? Is there an entire new religion that I'm really interested in? Do I want to get rid of all, religious ideals, and why? Do I have limiting beliefs? What beliefs are serving me, and in what ways? And this could be quite a sensitive period for you because, of course, Cancer is ruling this 9th house. And so we might even have this sort of emotional yearning or longing to travel and to travel abroad for a spiritual pilgrimage of some kind. Maybe we want to travel abroad for some kind of study, actually. So this is really a time to gain a greater sense of faith, to question faith, to develop our spiritual knowledge and wisdom, to study scriptures, and to come out the other side of this transit in a few years with a greater sense of hope and vision, a cosmology that guides us, and maybe certain teachers in our life or mentors that can help us along the path. And when you look at the next sign, before going there, just to mention, this is that beautiful trine relationship that Saturn will have to Cancer rising. So the trine to the ascendant is very, very fortunate here. And it does sense that any kind of trip or travel, the higher educational learning can really help you crystallize yourself out in the world. You can be benefited professionally. You can have a lot of ease here because we have the trine, the easiest aspect, the most flowing or supportive aspect coming to your rising sign here, Cancers, and also to your sun signs. If you are a Cancer sun, Cancer moon, any Cancer part of your chart will get this really supportive Saturn trine, and it will feel like you can accomplish what you want with this energy, and there's a greater flow for you. You might feel more emotional ease, even though you're working hard. It might feel like it's going in the right direction, and I can relax into it, right? And I don't have to be in an emotional anxiety so much. So then we look at Leos, and for you Leos, you know, there's always a lot of energy that you're bringing, and especially Leo risings, you know, but that energy now needs to go within, because Saturn is in your 8th house over the next few years. And the 8th house is where we do the deep work of accessing our unconscious. You know, if I've been afraid of something, if I have a phobia, what's really going on there? Why do I have that? Where can I source that out? And so we start to look at things we might be obsessed with or addicted to, the ways we maybe are self-destructive. Leo, you know, we can be kind of self-obsessed at times, and this might be a time to really look at, like, well, you know, how am I really being a leader in the world? Maybe maybe I'm being too self-focused. We become really sensitive during this cycle, especially to the deep and intimate relationships that we have with others. So that can be people I share my resources with. That could be a beloved. It could be the people I share a home with or a house with. If I'm working in a business and, you know, there's a lot on the line, you know, there's a big scale, maybe a lot of money involved. We tend to look at money a lot when Saturn is in the 8th house, especially the resources that we have from others. So it could be an inheritance comes into our life, and now I have a responsibility around that. It could be my partner's resources. And sometimes my partner has less resources at this time, which maybe means we both have less resources. And now have I become codependent in some ways? You know, there's certain kind of attachments we feel here, like we feel very tethered, you know, to others. Now, this is not a great time to take out a loan or to get in further debt. And if you do have debt, it will come up during this time. And so it's very important to pay off our debts, to kind of clean out, right? And clean up. And it's both on the sort of financial levels here, but also on the psychological levels. And partially we're looking at power and how we work with power in our life. Do we have enough power? Do we feel, you know, empowered to impact and change the world in a positive way? Or, you know, are we not involved with people that can help us do that? And we need to form some alliances. And that means that we may need to compromise some aspects of ourselves. And what does that feel like to compromise, right? This is a psychological question. And so, you know, we don't think of Leo as a very psychological sign often, but this is a cycle that will bring up those themes of a greater self-analysis, and even a question around mortality and our relationship to our own dying. We become aware of it. Maybe someone close to us dies or gets close to death, and it really makes us question our own relationship to it. So this can be a little bit awkward for the Leo types, but it's a very important cycle with Saturn moving through Pisces. as we look at Virgo sun, moon, rising, you're going to have that opposition from Saturn. And this is significant because in astrology, you know, every planet is associated with an aspect or a geometry in the sky. You know, squares, oppositions, trines, sextiles. And Saturn as a planet is connected and affiliated with the opposition. Saturn is the ruler of the seasons of a Capricorn and Aquarius. And if you look at the opposite of that, which would be the luminary, the life force of the sun in Leo, opposite Aquarius, and the moon in Cancer, opposite Capricorn. And so, okay, right? A Saturn opposition is a very tense, very, at times conflictual, confrontational type of angle. And so Virgos, you know, we always have a dedicated devotional approach to what we're doing in life. And in this case, Saturn is going to challenge that around relationships, the 7th house. And initially, what tends to happen here is that all of our one-on-one relationships become quite serious for us. So let's think if you are in a relationship, what tends to happen here? Well, you begin to question where you're going in the relationship, what the foundations are. Is it stable? Are we supporting each other? Do I feel supported or not? Is there a solid foundation? You don't feel as flexible with Saturn there. You might feel like the partner is more criticizing to you, or maybe analytical, or putting more pressures onto you. Now, you may also feel more serious about the relationship and you want to get married. You know, you're ready to sign a contract. You're ready to say, you know, this is what I'm committed to, and I would like that commitment to be reciprocated. There is a definite test for the relationship as we move in. If we've been in a long-term relationship, typically the areas that have been most, you know, prominent as challenges will really come to a head, or they'll be very much in our face during this time. And Saturn often brings a kind of ultimatum around relationship, you know, where it's like either we're all the way in or we're all the way out. And the all the way in is like the yes around that comes from some kind of big challenge that then we have to surmount. And so we can, by the end of this cycle, or even in the middle of it, we could get married. We could, yeah, that seriousness. I want this commitment. I'm going to do the work. And maybe we don't get committed forever. Maybe we do the hand fasting model, which I love to promote, you know, a year and a day, or a season together with the specific vows that we agree on that really fit us and what we want in our life. And then we come back around after 3 months or a year and we state again what we want, but it's new vows, right? And we've honored, we've acknowledged how Saturn matured and grown and accomplished and achieved, explored together. But we also may choose to hand part, which in the pagan and traditional world was a time where you would cut the cord, literally cut the cord, and that you would do that in an honorable way, a dignified way, respecting each other and what you've learned and how you've grown again and accomplished, but also that you're very clear that you're going in a different direction. And it is sometimes a reality where Saturn will say, this is not working. Time is up, Chronos, you know, Saturn is moving through the area of relationships, and it's, I want something different. You want something different. Maybe you become aware you want more solitude. You need more time alone. You may just even feel lonelier, even if you have a partner. Even in terms of colleague relationships, there's a more serious tone during this time. So what about if you're not in a relationship? Well, typically you may not be in a relationship for a little while with this. Saturn always delays whatever area of life he's touching. And so if he comes into your 7th house of partnership, you might not get that relationship right away, right? If you go on dates, maybe like the voice of Saturn may be like, no, within like 5 seconds of being on the date. And that sense of negation is a very Saturnian thing. So here he is in the area of relationships, right? So you also are getting clear about boundaries. Like, this is my bottom line. And so also, like, it's not really like a romantic transit when Saturn is there. It's a much more like, could I build a family with this person, right? If that's something you want, or could we share a house together, or maybe we're going to do some work together, or like, it's a more serious question. It's not just having fun. And you could say that, Virgos, this is where you really want to have that kind of dedicated, devotional, yogic type of partnership that is part of your own nature to be really reflected. And you just want to do something else if that's not going to come into your life. You want to dedicate your high priest, high priestess energy to something that feels like it's more solid in your life. And so you might feel some of that Virgo archetype of the virgin, of being chaste, of just maybe not having a partner during these couple of years. And maybe it's a relationship with yourself or with spirit and your work, right? And that's okay. We have to make ourselves wrong, but just be aware that this is where you're getting clear on what you do want and don't want in terms of commitment. And that's very, very important. So Libra risings, Libra suns, Libra moons, Libra is a sign that does very well with Saturn, because Saturn is what we call exalted in Libra. And if you've ever wondered about that, why that is, it's because if you think about the world of business, Saturn being professional life and business, it's all built on establishing solid relationships, which is the gift of Libra. And so we have Saturn in your 6th house, which, is the house of health. It's the house of illness. It's also the house of karma yoga, duties, what we have to do every day. And, in a way, Saturn can do quite well in this house. Like, as long as you have discipline and you have a regular practice every day, and, you might work longer hours. And that's why it's very important, as Saturn's coming into this house at this time, if you're in a job that you do not like, you need to be careful and probably make a change right away, because the longer you sustain in that job or stay there, you're likely to get very burnt out or very bitter with who you're having to work with. And this is the house of like the employees, the people around us, and the tasks that you have to take care of. So the task could get very weighty at this time. Thus, we would like to be doing things that we love to be doing every day, even if they're seemingly a bit mundane, right? Like updating the website, right? Doing a lot of back end stuff that people aren't seeing, right? Admin, these types of things. Again, maybe working with other employees we might have. But there's a lot of tasks. There's a lot of things we have to do. We have to be quite accountable with all of the work, which can kind of bog us down at times. And we have to be very careful to not work too hard. We could become a workaholic with this energy. And then this is where our health can be compromised with Saturn is in the 6th house. It becomes really important to look at like time management here, time mastery, time mapping. I love to do that work with clients and use your chart to help you time when to do what. So that's really appropriate for you, that you're not trying to fight against your natural cycles. And this is a time, Libras, where your rhythms are going to become really important to honor, and that you can't just give yourself to relationships. You sometimes can do that and lose sort of track of where you are and what's healthiest for you. And that is not going to work during this time. And we also have to get rid of, too many extracurricular things, right? Maybe we've just, we're wasting time watching TV, or, taking 10 hours to cook food and clean. And, Saturn in this house is going to get very, very stern about that. He's going to say, I could be accomplishing so much more if I just, made a pot of stew at the beginning of the week and ate it every day and didn't have to worry about it again, right? So it's like that. And now in terms of, we talked about, it's kind of habits, right? This is the realm of habits. This could also be that you really want to clean up any negative habits that you have in, unhealthy habits in your life, smoking, drinking, different things like that. And you may, again, benefit from fasting. Diet becomes important. This is an area where you do really want to do preventative health, and making sure that you do see a doctor when you need to, if something's coming up, and tune into the bones and the joints and the skin, because these are Saturn ruled areas when it comes to medical astrology. And those tend to be issues during Saturn's movement through the sixth house. So Libras, pay attention to those areas, and note that, again, this cycle may kind of challenge you around the relationships in your life. Like, for instance, you may have more day-to-day tasks, and you may not be able to dedicate as much time to a partnership. And so you're going to have to learn how to balance, Libra, that deep desire you have to be in relationship, and also to accomplish things every day that feel meaningful to you. And, it might not be meaningful like in the moment, but it's meaningful in the greater fabric of what's being created, right? And, that disciplined practice that you have every day of doing meditation or yoga or breath work, going to the gym, these things are really important for everything else in your system to be functioning properly and efficiently. And efficiency is very important when Saturn is in this house. So then when we look at Scorpio risings, right? Scorpio types, this is when you have a very beneficial trine from Saturn. Saturn's in your fifth house. And what we know about the fifth house is it's an area of creativity. Now, that could be literally creating a child, so it is the realm of children, or it could be our own creative children, however that might show up for us. It's an area of fun and recreation and play. So remember that Saturn, when he starts this process in the house, he brings a kind of sense of contraction or limitation or constriction. So then we might feel like a creative block. Maybe we've been very serious and we don't know how to break out of that. And or we have a negative perspective on our creativity. And so we need to very seriously examine what makes us feel very alive, very vital, very childlike, and how we can tap into that. And it's a really, really good recommendation to look at a creative project that you can begin at this time that may take you a few years to really cultivate and actualize, to its fullest potential. For instance, a book, right? A book is not an overnight thing. I know I wrote both of my books during Saturn in my fifth house. I began one earlier than that, and then I completed it in the fifth. I began and completed the second one in the fifth. So these are long-term projects, and they require that Saturn, we could say reverse engineering, right? Where I see the end, the goal, And then I have to kind of backtrack, build the outline, right? Which is kind of how you have to build a book, right? You have to know what you're trying to achieve, who your audience is. Whether that's fiction or nonfiction, you really have to get clarity about that before you even begin the writing process, usually, right? I mean, your coaching practice, if you're a coach, could be a creative process, right? Painting, drawing, dancing, right? Music. Maybe these are things you've always wanted to try. And now with Saturn moving through here, like I have to do this, you know, it's something I always wanted to do. And of course, as you begin that process, it's very frustrating. But you're actually getting a sort of serious evaluation around what your talents are and how you can really build a consistent Saturn, right? Consistency. It has that ST sound in it too. Consistent relationship to your creative process. But also remember that this is the area of children. And so this is also going to highlight a relationship with your child, if you do have one, or children. And again, there could be some kind of distance or a block between you and them. Maybe it's the time where you just don't feel very close to your children, or they distance themselves from you. And we don't want to necessarily create a whole story around that, but we may need to have a more serious relationship with them. Maybe they act more like an authority figure to us than we do to them. Or maybe we have difficulty playing that role with them. So it does highlight the need to bring more focus and attention to our relationship with our children. And sometimes also with romance and love life, you know, it doesn't feel so playful. Like it doesn't feel like it's happening so easily, right? And so we want to be patient with this process. It's like our pride can get a little wounded when Saturn is in the 5th house. And so we need to just remember, like, give ourselves some places to play and have fun, and know that we are, you know, working diligently towards, you know, feeling more creatively liberated and free. And then Sagittarius, this is, again, like Gemini, we're going to have that square from Saturn, but it's the square in the area of the home. And this is quite significant because we know that when there's a Saturn placement in home, there's going to be some kind of restructuring around our home environment. Now, obviously that can mean renovation, right? And this can be quite intense, right? If we have to redo parts of our home. We may want to buy a home, right? It's going to take a lot of work, a lot of effort, but it will build over time, right? That's the idea by buying a home. And a lot of the times we have to actually look at our family of origin during this time, ancestors. This is the foundations of the chart. So Sagittarius, you know, you're an explorer, you're an adventurer, you're seeking the truth, and maybe not spending a lot of time with family or focused on family often, but this could be a time where you really need to go back. You may look at early imprints. And sort of the idea of conditioning, right? The early influences of life, certain ancestral patterns that have repeated. And this can be quite important to helping you lay a more solid foundation moving forward in your life. And if you are going to move, which we typically see during this time, if you're not renovating the place that you're working on. And you just feel like kind of a general slowdown. Remember that Saturn would be squaring the Sagittarius rising. And so the square to the rising sign can always be just life feeling like it needs to slow down, right? It's difficult for Sagittarius, right? Which, you know, the mutable signs tend to move fast. They tend to change a lot, but this can really say, from Saturn, a demand for Sagittarius. If you want to be that inspirer and that teacher that you are in the world, you need to really cohere your teachings and what you've learned in your travels. You can't just keep going. Maybe you want to write a book or publish or broadcast or vlog or blog, right? These are Sagittarian things. And in order to do that, all the movement may be too challenging for you to do it, right? So there is a greater reining in of this wild stallion during this time, and to look at rooting down and being okay with that, accepting that, and not feeling like I'm caged in or imprisoned from that. Now, with Capricorn rising, Saturn rules Capricorn, and this can be a cycle that can be actually quite fortunate, because you have the sextile Capricorns from Saturn. So there's a lot of creative fusion happening here, and there can be a lot more sort of artistic inspiration in some of the businesses or the role you play as a leader or an elder in the world. Someone who tends to have pressures and like having certain responsibilities in their life, being accountable. And now you're looking at, well, there's something about how I'm thinking about things that needs to be really examined. The third house is where we put a lot of ideas together and we synthesize our thoughts. And so we're starting to look at, well, how do I perceive what's going on around me? Maybe you sense that you need to put out a lot more mental content. Like maybe you just want to write a book or many books. And how are you going to fulfill on those? Maybe your mind's been in too many places and you need to structure it. You need to systematize it. This could also be true for marketing. This could be a big marketing cycle, getting out there with your brand or what message you have. You may also realize that you don't know enough about a topic and you need some trainings, you need to learn. And so this could be a time where you're in some ongoing education. We don't think of it so much as like the philosophical education that we might think of with the ninth house, but more of like specific trainings you need to accomplish. Like maybe you want to start designing your own website and you need to learn how to do that. So you need to spend days to do that, and because you want that creative control. But your basically your time and effort is a lot around learning and synthesizing what you have learned to share it with others. And there is a lot of busyness on the day-to-day as well. As a whole, you might just feel a little bit more introspective, or you may appreciate like reading a lot, learning a lot. So letting the mind, slowly like cook, right, over topics and ideas. And then over time, you're getting clear about how you want to put them together. Don't let yourself become too mental during this process. You're always out there trying to accomplish Capricorn. So it's about putting thoughts into a sort of pragmatic form in your lives. And lastly, Aquarius, also a sign ruled by Saturn. This is when Saturn is going to be in your second house now. And this is where we have to look at our sense of self-worth, self-confidence, and our values. And so always at the beginning of the cycle, there seems to be some challenge around our money. This is the area of finances. And we can feel like we have less when Saturn's in this house. But what's really happening is Saturn is getting us a lot more serious about our resources. And so we want to look at, okay, do I have a spreadsheet? Am I taking stock of what I'm spending, where my purchases are going? Is that really aligned with my unfolding values? Am I being effective with my use of time and money? and energy. So a little bit of resource management here, right? Again, because Saturn can be associated with loss or delay or a feeling of frustration, naturally they could be like, wow, that money isn't coming in right now. And so creating a financial plan and looking at your investments is really important during this cycle. And you'd really want to think about a diversification of a financial portfolio. You know, if you've been too heavily invested in certain areas, you may need to do a complete restructuring of that. Maybe you lost some money with crypto or something like that. You really need to reorder your relationship to your finances. And maybe you pull out of certain areas that you don't feel are really in alignment with you anymore. Maybe you want to think about more long-term investments, maybe things like real estate. But also just consider, like, this is what I value, and this is where I'm going to put more time in and energy in. And this is really about your hard work. This is not finances that you gain through others like the eighth house, but it's really through your day in, day out grinding to make it happen. And so you might get clear here again too, that like work-wise, this is not how I want to make money. And so then you might shift your work even when Saturn is moving through your second house. It's really good to save as much money as you can during this time. So being on a budget can be really beneficial. Long-term financial planning, it's in a sense financial responsibility. And make sure that you can really rely on yourself, right? That you're not really codependent or reliant on other resources or inheritances or anything like that, but you're really aligning your day-to-day life with doing the things that you love to do, earning the money in a way that feels really valuable to you, in alignment with you. And then you're coming out this cycle feeling really confident moving forward. And, you know, maybe you have a little bit less resource, or maybe you have more because you've established a great structure in which to build upon. So this can be actually a very rewarding time, but it's not usually financially greatly successful. It's more that you can come out of it more confident with how you're approaching your finances, and that will really take you forward on a path of success. So this is Saturn moving through all of the signs, moving through all of the houses, and it's going to be a very powerful few years here for all of us when Saturn's in Pisces. And it's important to really honor this cycle and to understand that this is a more spiritually aligned time in our lives. And that Pisces house for you is where you can always be applying a more creative and imaginative approach, connection with guides and allies in the spirit world. And so whatever house that is for you where Saturn has been, consider that and consider how you can keep that thread of consciousness between you and these other realms to inspire maybe some insight, some information, some pathways that you might not have considered before, right? And during this time with Saturn and Pisces, we have to work with the dream worlds, the spirit worlds, the other dimensions to get a lot of clarity. So I hope this has been helpful for you, inspiring for you. If you'd like to look at a reading and getting some further coaching, I'm happy to offer discounts for Pisces rising or Pisces sun sign. So just send me a message at the link below and let's stay in contact. And if you'd like to know more about Saturn and Pisces, you can always look at the other video on the topic. This has been VerDarLuz with the practical esoteric and divine timing coaching. Such a beautiful time to serve you, and wishing you all the best. Namaste.